אני מאמין באמונה שלמה בביאת המשיח, אני מאמין ואף על פי שהתמהמה עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא.
For top quality floors,
ואף על פי שהתמהמה עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה בביאת המשיח, אני מאמין ואף על פי שהתמהמה עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. ואף על פי שהתמהמה עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. בכל יום שיבוא. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה בביאת המשיח, אני מאמין ואף על פי שהתמהמה עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. ואף על פי שהתמהמה עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה בביאת המשיח, אני מאמין ואף על פי שהתמהמה עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. ואף על פי שהתמהמה עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. בכל יום שיבוא. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה בביאת המשיח, אני מאמין ואף על פי שהתמהמה עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. ואף על פי שהתמהמה עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. אני מאמין אמונה שלמה בביאת המשיח, אני מאמין. ואף על פי שיתמהמה, עם כל זה אחכה לו, בכל יום שיבוא. ואף על פי שיתמהמה, עם כל זה אחכה לו, בכל יום שיבוא. בכל יום שיבוא. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה בביאת המשיח, אני מאמין. ואף על פי שיתמהמה, עם כל זה אחכה לו, בכל יום שיבוא. ואף על פי שיתמהמה, עם כל זה אחכה לו, בכל יום שיבוא.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. We're going to begin in the next 2 minutes. In the next 2 minutes, we're going to begin.
אני מאמין אמונה שלמה בביאת המשיח, אני מאמין. ואף על פי שיתמהמה, עם כל זה אחכה לו, בכל יום שיבוא. ואף על פי שיתמהמה, עם כל זה אחכה לו, בכל יום שיבוא. בכל יום שיבוא. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are listening in from. Shabbat Shalom again. Let's say a quick prayer so that we can hit the ground running. Father, we thank you for another opportunity to sit before Israel, to sit as a family, to study your Torah. We ask that you give us the tongue of the learned, give us the spirit of the learned, give us the ability to comprehend your Torah. Open our eyes so that we see these mysteries that you've hidden in these feasts and why you ordained them. We ask for clarity. We pray that we'll be able to learn so that we would teach ourselves first, and then we can teach those that we run into. Clarity is what I ask for. Anybody that is here with the sound of my voice. Thank you, Yovel, because you always show up. Thank you, Yovel. Thank you and thank you. Amen. Shabbat Shalom again. Good morning. I know it's a little early for some of us. But before we hit the ground running, is there anything anybody wants to share? Those in the class, we are broadcasting this live on YouTube. Heads up. So if you have anybody who is not part of our Shabbat classes and you want them to listen in, you can send the link to them. I'm going to post the link if I find it. I'm going to post the link here so you can share the link with anybody who is not part of our Shabbat lessons and you want them to listen in. Greetings to everybody listening on YouTube. Shabbat Shalom to you. I hope you all had a good week. I'm looking forward to this Shavuot Yovel lecture or webinar, whatever you want to call it. But before we hit the ground running, anything anybody wants to say before we start? Our usual 2 minutes, and then we can start our webinar. There we go. Any questions, any contributions, any comments before we begin? Wow, everybody is not awake now. I know our 9 a.m. class is going to be lively. Okay, if there are no questions, then let's go ahead and begin. Toy is laughing. Let's go ahead and begin our class here. If I can get my, there we go. So we're going to be talking about the Feast of Shavuot. We're going to look at Shavuot from the lens of Yovel. I would say this class will be somewhat an intermediate class. Might not define all of my terms. I am assuming you already are familiar with these terms. If not, after the webinar, I can give further explanations, or I can define these terms for you. I can respond to emails. But I am assuming that we all know what Shavuot is. I'm assuming that we all know what Yovel is. So based on that, we're going to begin. We did the Feast of Pesach. And after Pesach, the next feast is what we call the Feast of Weeks, what we would say Shavuot. In trying to figure out the essence of Shavuot, the natural place to start would be the biblical verses that describe the holiday itself. We see this in Leviticus 23. I'm going to read from verses 15. And you shall count for yourself from the morrow of the rest day, from the day you bring the Omer as a wave offering, 7 Sabbaths, they shall be complete. You shall count until the day after the 7th Sabbath, namely the 50th day, on which you shall bring a new meal offering to Yovel. Let me pause and say this. As usual with the webinar, I'm going to finish my slides and then I would open it up for comments, questions, contributions, and additions. Okay. So when we meditate on these phrases that we've just read, let me read it again in Leviticus 23:15. And you shall count for yourselves from the morrow of the rest day, from the day you bring the Omer as a wave offering, 7 Sabbaths. They shall be complete. You shall count until the day after the 7th Sabbath, namely the 50th day, on which you shall bring a new meal offering to Yovel. When we meditate on these phrases and ideas we have just read, do they remind us of anything else in the Torah? When we meditate on the different elements that we hear after reading, do they remind us of anything else in the Torah? Why am I not recording this here? That's not good. There we go. So when we meditate on these phrases and ideas that we have just read, do they remind us of anything else in the Torah? When it comes to this holiday, the Torah asks us to count for yourselves. When else does the Torah ask you to count time for yourself, to count units of time for yourself? We are also told a 7 times 7 days that we are supposed to count. When else are we asked to count 7 times 7 units of time? When else are we supposed to count 7 Sabbaths until we get to the 50th? The only time is during Yovel or Jubilee. It's all the same, down to the precise language of the text. The only difference is whether you're counting days or years. Every 7th year is known as the Shemitah or sabbatical year. And during the Shemitah, outstanding debts are canceled and the land rests, lying fallow and unharvested, with all the fruits available for the picking by everyone, not just the owners of that particular field. So the Torah tells us that not only are we meant to count years until we reach 7, at which time we are also meant to proclaim a Sabbath year, but the Torah also tells us that we're supposed to count these Sabbaths, these 7-year units. Let me repeat that again. The Torah tells us that not only are we meant to count years until we reach 7, at which time we are also meant to proclaim a Sabbath year, but the Torah also tells us that we're supposed to count these Sabbaths, these 7 units of time. After every 49 years in total, the very next year, the 50th, we are meant to proclaim a Yovel or a Jubilee year. I am taking for granted that you know what Yovel is. You understand what Jubilee is. If you don't, I can respond to those after the class. Okay. So on the Yovel year, just like the Shemitah year, fruits are available for picking by everyone, and the land can't be tilled or harvested by the owner. But in addition to all that, 2 more crucial things happen. Number 1, servants are automatically set free from their masters. Put that in your spirit. Number 2, land returns to its original ancestral owner. Land in Israel. People mistake this. Every day we want our land back. But land in Israel was apportioned to tribes and to families within those tribes as an inheritance. So if you possess this ancestral land, you could sell part of it or all of it. But on the Yovel year, the land will go back to you. This is our quick background on Yovel. But now let's add it all up. For Yovel, you're supposed to count 7 units of 7 Sabbaths according to the text. And then the next one, you're supposed to proclaim a Yovel. On Shavuot, you're supposed to count 7 units of 7 days. Again, Sabbaths, according to the text. And then the next one, you're supposed to proclaim as a holiday of Shavuot. So you see what is happening. On Yovel, you have 7 times 7, but you count in years. On Shavuot, you have 7 times 7, but you count in days. What we are trying to do is look at the feast of Shavuot through the lens of Yovel. We're trying to look at the feast, the Moed of Shavuot, through the lens of Yovel to see the message that it tells us. So, I'm not making up how strange the correspondence sound. It's right there in the verses. Listen to the language carefully, and you see how even the particular words the Torah picks to describe these two phenomena, Yovel and Shavuot, seem to contain intentional echoes of one another. Let's look at the two verses. Look at Leviticus 20 up there, and then Leviticus 25 down here. Leviticus 23, and you shall count for yourself. You have the same thing when you come to Yovel, Leviticus 25, and you shall count for yourself. In Leviticus 23, you're told to count 7 Sabbaths. Please, when you log in the class, try to mute your mic. So in Leviticus 23, we are told to count 7 Sabbaths. In Leviticus 25, you have 7 sabbatical years. In Leviticus 23, it says the 50th day. In Leviticus 25, you have the 50th day also. The 50th year. So whilst you're counting days on Shavuot, you're counting years on Yovel. The language is all similar. It's all the same. The Safatalaka, the language of counting, is the same in both. The language of Shiva Shabbatot is same in both. Until the 50th is same in both. It's all the same. The only difference is what we are counting. Are we counting days when it comes to Shavuot, or are we counting years when it comes to Yovel? The language is all the same. Let's look at Yovel. When was the first place in the Bible that the word Yovel ever appears? Believe it or not, it is not with reference to the Yovel year. The word appears way before that. It appears all the way back in the book of Exodus. There we had a single solitary reference to Yovel, and it comes, of all places, in the Torah's description of the revelation at Sinai. The Torah tells us that at Sinai, the people weren't actually allowed to touch the mountain. But at the close of the moment of revelation, I repeat that, at the close of the moment of revelation, there was a great shofar blast. And when that shofar blast was heard, there was the signal, or that was the signal, that it will be safe for the people to approach and to touch the mountain. Now, guess what the word for that shofar at Sinai was? Exodus 19. No hand shall touch it, that is the mountain, for he shall be stoned or cast down, whether man or beast, he shall not live. When the Hayovel, the ram's horn, sounds a long blast, they may ascend the mountain. Quite fascinating. Something called the Yovel shofar signal the end of revelation at Sinai. But now ask yourself, how does a Yovel year actually start? What signals its onset? As it turns out, the signal for the beginning of the Yovel year is also a shofar blast. At the end of Revelation at Sinai, we see a shofar blast called the shofar Yovel. And then at the beginning of the Yovel itself, there is also a shofar blast. In Leviticus 25, we see that. You shall proclaim with the shofar blasts in the 7th month. The very instrument that signals the end of revelation at Sinai signals the beginning of the Yovel year. What is the Torah trying to hide in order that we discover so that we get more clarity about Shavuot? We get in there. One of the striking things about Yovel year is the way the biblical text sums it up. According to the text, all the Yovel laws, the return of land, slaves going free, letting the land rest, all of that gets summed up in these brief words, spoken as it were by Yovel. About Yovel, how does he sum it up? He says, Kili haaretz, for the entire land is mine. Kili haaretz, that's how he sums it up, meaning for the entire land is mine. We see that in Leviticus 25. The land shall not be sold permanently, for the land belongs to me. Kili haaretz, for the entire land is mine. So Yovel expresses the truth that the land ultimately belongs to Yahweh. At some level, human possession of land is only an illusion. I repeat that. At some level, human possession of land is only an illusion. Yahweh is the ultimate possessor of this resource. It's a very intriguing idea. Now and again, focus on the language. We're looking at language, we're looking at parallels, we're looking at echoes to come up to the truth about Shavuot. Focus again on the language. Think about that phrase, Kili haaretz. Think about that and then ask where you have heard it before. That phrase did not originate with Yovel. It appears one other time earlier in the 5 books of Moses. It appears only another time in the entire 5 books of Moses, where the lone other occurrence of that phrase is at Sinai. Yahweh says that Israel will be a treasure to him among the nations. And he says, Kili ko haaretz. We see that in Exodus 19. And now, if you obey me and keep my covenant, you shall be to me a treasure out of all peoples. Kili ko haaretz. For mine is the entire earth. This appears one other time in the entire 5 books of Moshe, at Yovel and here at Sinai. Yahweh says to Israel, you will be a treasure to me amongst the nations. Kili ko haaretz, for the entire earth, or the entire land is mine. So we see that Yovel and Shavuot seem to be speaking the same languages. Why is that? What we have seen so far is that the Yovel year is modeled after an earlier event, which is the Sinai event. How does any of this remind us about Sinai? I want to suggest to you that it does. Most of the time, you and I, we tend to see the significance of revelation in terms of the giving of the Torah. Everybody focuses on that. What happened at Sinai? What happened on Shavuot? We got the Torah. We tend to see the significance of revelation in terms of the giving of the Torah. But the language through which the Torah introduces the laws of Yovel suggests that there is another lens through which to see revelation, and which is the Yovel lens. And that's what we're doing today. That blast of the Yovel shofar, it wasn't tangential to revelation. It was important. That Yovel shofar that was blown is not, or it was not, tangential to revelation. It was very important. So we have seen that before there was ever the law of Yovel, there was a great nationwide Yovel experience, which is Sinai. Before the law of Yovel, there was a great nationwide Yovel experience, which was at Sinai. But it turns out that this was not the only great nationwide Yovel-like experience. On their way out of the desert, heading to the land of Israel, this was not the only Yovel-like experience. There was a second. There was a second historical Yovel event that we have to look at in order to complete the picture. We see a Yovel event at Sinai. We know about the original Yovel instructions, but there is a third one, or a second if you count them from Sinai. There is a second historic Yovel event that we have to look at in order to complete the picture. What was that second historic Yovel event? It was Jericho. They received Torah at Sinai, and now they've journeyed all the way to Jericho. So the second historic one, depending on how you're counting it, was the conquest of the city of Jericho. The city of Jericho was the first city conquered by the children of Israel as they entered the land of Israel. The tale of that conquest, as we know, is told in the beginning of the book of Joshua. The Jericho narrative has many dramatic elements, but perhaps the most dramatic of all is the way in which Yovel engineers the city's capture. The Almighty causes the walls surrounding Jericho to simply collapse under themselves. Now, parenthetically, we might ask why it had to happen that way. I mean, it's dramatic and all, but was there any meaning to Yovel's choice of this particular means of engineering the conquest of the city? You know, why did he not use fire and brimstone raining down from heaven? That would have done the trick also, but he chose not to do that. Was there any meaning in this particular choice of miracle causing the walls of Jericho to collapse? There has to be. If he does not use fire and brimstone and he asks them to perform a ritual, then there has to be meaning behind it. The miracle of the walls collapse or collapsing didn't just happen out of the blue. Yovel required an elaborate ceremony to be performed first by the children of Israel who are encamped outside the city. And when you look at the ceremony, it seems a little bit haphazard. It's almost like Yovel was asking us to say abracadabra before his great heavenly magic trick of causing the walls to fall down. But was it really just a random bunch of ceremonies we needed to undertake before the great magician in the sky did his wall collapsing trick? I don't think so. Or was there some deep and abiding reason for it all? Let's look at the ceremony and let's get some clarity. Here's what Yovel asked Joshua to do. And Yovel said to Joshua, "See, I have given you your land, Jericho, and its king, the mighty warriors, and you shall circle the city. All the men of war go around about the city once. Thus shall you do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. And on the 7th day you shall encircle the city 7 times. And the priests shall blow with the trumpets. And it shall be that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the peoples shall shout a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down in its place, and the people shall go up, every man opposite him. So, in summary, first, all the Israelite warriors must walk around the city. They need to make a circuit around its walls once a day for 6 consecutive days. While they do that, 7 Kohanim holding 7 shofrot, 7 shofars, should be walking in front of the Ark of the Covenant and in advance of the warriors. Then on the 7th day, the people should circle the city 7 times. And then the Kohanim should blow on the shofrot or the shofars. Then the people should all cry out. And at that moment, the walls will fall. Now, look at all the 7s here. Let's look at Yovel's big plan. 7 days. On the 7th day, 7 circuits around the city, 7 Kohanims with 7 shofars. Everything is 7 times 7. And what tops it all off is the shofar blast. The 7 times 7 days of Jericho come with the shofar blast at the end. The 7 times 7 years of the Yovel cycle come with the shofar blast at the end. Now, Jericho is starting to sound like Yovel. And if you keep looking, the correspondence just deepens. Well, here's the kicker. The Torah gives us a name to these shofrot, these shofars that were blown at Jericho. What name does it give them? You probably guessed it. They are called the shofrot hayovelim. The shofrot or the shofars of Jericho were called shofrot hayovelim, just like the shofar at Sinai was. I repeat that. The shofars that was blown at Jericho was called shofrot ha-yovelim, just like the shofars that was blown at Sinai. The 7 Kohanims will carry 7 Yovel shofars before the ark, as we're told in Joshua 6:4. So not only is it that the shofar names are the same at Jericho and at Sinai, even the language of the text describing these 2 events are remarkably similar. Listen to it in Hebrew. First, at Sinai, the text says, when the shofar would blow an elongated blast, that's when it would be safe for the people to touch the mountain and ascend it. But look at those words in Hebrew. B'misho hayovel, yalu baha. Pay attention to those 3 words. Misho, Yovel, and Yalu, to go up. And now look at Jericho, same 3 words, virtually identical. When the shofar of the Yovel would blow elongated blast, Ve'alu aham, the people would ascend and would conquer Jericho. The walls, they would fall, but the people, they would ascend. Yalu. Misho, Yovel, Yalu. In Exodus 19:13, we have the same 3 words show up in Joshua 6:5. Misho, Yovel, Yalu. What is going on? Why the same words? Are they mirror images? Are we missing something? Have we missed something? One more element too. At Sinai, the mountain was encircled, and at Jericho, the city was encircled too. The encirclement at Sinai somehow put the mountain off limits. Anyone who will touch it will die. And the encirclement at Jericho somehow put the city off limits. Joshua says that anyone who goes back to Jericho and rebuilds it is cursed with death of his children. We're seeing parallels. So together, these two experiences that the children of Israel lived through as they traveled from Egypt to the promised land, that is the Sinai event and then the Jericho event, they express two sides of the same coin. And the laws of Yovel are the secret to their connection. Sinai, what happened at Sinai and what happened at Jericho, they express two sides of the same coin. And the laws of Yovel are the secrets to their connection. What was the interaction? What were they looking at Sinai when they got the Torah? When they did similar at Jericho and they entered the land, what was the message behind that? When we decipher that, we get to understand Shavuot from a different lens, which is the Yovel lens. So to this point, we've seen a lot of language connections. Shavuot seems related to Yovel, so does Sinai, so does Jericho. But connections are one thing. Deciphering why things are connected is entirely another thing. That's what we need to turn to now. If we can understand something of the meaning behind these language connections, if we can understand why Sinai and Jericho have anything to do with Yovel, then we might begin to understand what it is that the Yovel year is meant to replay. Then we might begin to understand what it is that Shavuot is also meant to replay. If we understand what Yovel is meant to replay, we can understand what Shavuot is also meant to replay. And we do that by looking at the laws of Yovel. Let's go back to Yovel as it expresses itself in the Torah. What exactly does this year do? The truth is that it does two things. And both of these things might have had a great deal of relevance to the nation of Israel that wandered through the desert, experienced the revelation at Sinai, and then experienced the Jericho conquest. These three things all play together. The experience at Sinai saw its end when they entered Jericho. So that experience carried them all through to get into Jericho and then getting through those walls. These two things that Yovel does are expressed by the Torah in the following language. Okay. And you shall sanctify the 50th day and proclaim freedom for slaves. Put that in your spirit. Throughout the land for all who live on it. It shall be a jubilee for you, and you shall return each man to his property. Put that in your spirit. We see two things here. Proclaim freedom for slaves, and then you shall return each man to his property, each man to his family. Okay, so just a review. The Torah says that land goes back to its primary owner. And slaves are released. These two things were more than ideal curiosities for the Israelites on their journey through the desert. Land goes back to its primary owner, and then slaves are released. Let's first talk about the land. The Israelites were about to conquer the land of Canaan, but in a deep way, they weren't really conquering it. They weren't occupying somebody else's land. I repeat that because it's critical. The Israelites or the Hebrews were about to conquer the land of Canaan, but in a deep way, they weren't really conquering it. They weren't occupying somebody else's land. There was a Yovel event that was going on simultaneously with the conquest. There was a Yovel event going on simultaneously with the conquest. What was happening was that the land of Canaan was returning to a deeper owner, to an ancestral owner. The land had been promised as an ancestral holding to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, our forefathers, who had lived in this land long ago and had been promised it. That land was now returning to its rightful place as the inheritance of the children of Israel. So when the shofar blast sounded at Jericho, it truly was the shofar of the Yovel. The 7 circuits of the people on the 7 days and the 7 circuits on the 7th day, it was like the 7 times 7 circuits of time that comprised the 49 years of the Yovel cycle. A Yovel event was happening. And as a consequence, the walls of Jericho were going to come down. They were going to come tumbling down. It wasn't a coincidence. The walls came tumbling down. That is, of all things, was the mode by which Israel would take possession of Jericho. It would happen through the walls coming down because walls signify ownership. Anybody who owns land, I believe in most third world country, you buy the land, and as your title, you build a wall around it. Walls signify ownership. Sometimes you buy the piece of land, you don't even have a property on the land. But the first smart thing that we do, is build a wall on that piece of land, because walls signify ownership. So it would all happen through the walls coming down because walls signify ownership. The Canaanite walls would evaporate because their hold on the land, not just their physical control of the land, but their legal control, their title was evaporating, which were the walls. The land of Canaan was going back to its deeper owner, the progeny of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They were the ancestral holders of the land. So this is what happened at Jericho. The walls came down. Their legal hold evaporated. The land was returning back to its ancestral holder. What about at Sinai? In what way was Sinai a Yovel-like event? We've seen how Jericho was a Yovel-like event because land goes back to its primary owner during Yovel, and that is what happened at Jericho. Land was going back to us. What about at Sinai? In what way was Sinai a Yovel-like event? Well, remember that Yovel does the second thing. Land doesn't just go back to the primary owner. It doesn't just release ancestral land back to its original owner. It also takes slaves and makes them free. That's interesting because at Sinai, they hadn't yet gotten to the land. They had just left Egypt. That was what was on their mind. And in Egypt, they were slaves. So having escaped Egypt, they were no longer subjugated by cruel Egyptian masters. But is it possible that on some level, they were not yet completely free? That is a yes. An escaped slave is not the same as a fully freed slave. An escaped slave is not the same as a fully free person. Might Sinai then have been the event that finally freed them? In some ultimate sense, yes. So what I'm asking, in other words, could Sinai have been their Yovel experience or event. Or let me phrase it differently. Could Sinai have been their Yovel event, the moment at which slavery completely evaporated and became just a restless memory of time past? Yes, it was the Sinai event. When they left Egypt and they were walking those 50 days getting to Sinai, they were not free yet. It was the event at Sinai that actually made them free. An escaped slave is not the same as a fully free person. Awesome. So, with that statement, can everybody hear me? Mr. Dewar says my audio is breaking up from time to time.
Yeah, it does sometimes, but it comes back.
Okay. Let me change something here. Network is good quality. Okay, this should take care of it. Okay, let's hope it doesn't do that. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can change my connection here. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can change my, oh, it's doing Wi-Fi. We don't want Wi-Fi. Okay, switched from Wi-Fi. There we go. Okay, we should be good. My apologies. I don't know why I was. It was on a Wi-Fi connection. Okay. Okay, we should be better now. My apologies. So if you missed anything critical, it would be on the recording. So all is not lost, but pardon me for that. I should have checked this. Okay, let's make sure the YouTube guys are good. Yes, they're good. Let's continue. So exactly why would escaped slaves not be free? Exactly why would escape from Egypt not in itself be enough to free Israel or enough to set Israel free? That point, I think, will need to be refined a bit more, because we know the minute the children of Israel left Egypt, they were no longer subject to their Egyptian masters. so they are free. That's what we would think. But I'm saying not necessarily. So what else needs to happen exactly? Why do I need Sinai to somehow complete the process? In what sense, really, is an escaped slave not fully free? Let's start by looking. Let me mute mics. Please mute your mics when you join. Thank you. Let's start by looking at how Yovel speaks with Abraham concerning the Israelites, the Hebrews' descent into hundreds of years of slavery. The first thing he tells Abraham is, your children will be strangers in the land not their own. And the inhabitants of that land, they will enslave them. They will abuse them for 400 years. Your children will be strangers in the land not theirs. And the next thing he tells him is, and the inhabitants of that land, they will enslave them. And they will abuse them for 400 years. The process starts with being dispossessed of land, finding yourself strangers on someone else's land. That's the most benign step in the process. That's the most gentle or kind step in the process. But it's the starting point. And it makes you vulnerable to the next step, which is slavery. The most extreme step is the last one, the third one. They will be abused, crushed with hard labor. If you think about it, this progression is not something that exists only in an ancient sacred text such as the Torah. No, it is alive and well in today's age too. Let's think about citizenship. Most of the time, you and me would take citizenship for granted. But what is it like not to be a citizen? We take citizenship for granted. What is it like? I'm asking a rhetorical question. What is it like not to be a citizen?
You don't receive full rights.
Thank you, sir. Very good answer. I'll use a friend of mine. I won't mention names, but I would use her as an example to get the point across, just as my brother just did. A friend of mine happens to be an illegal immigrant, what we'll say a girl, a stranger, in someone else's land. For the last 7 years, she's been working as a housekeeper for wages that you and I will never accept. She's grateful to have the job, but she has no chance for advancement. She's a girl, and she's doing difficult housework, work that few American citizens are willing to do. She doesn't have a way out. The family she works for abuses her. What is her recourse? Calling the police? That is not an option because she'll be deported. She has no protection because she is not a citizen, because she is not a stakeholder in the land. She's extremely vulnerable to the modern equivalent of enslavement. She's vulnerable to abuse. My point is that there is a natural connection between land and slavery. The former is a defense wall against the latter. Owning land is my guarantee that I will not become a slave. This is true for citizens, those who hold a stake in the collective land ownership of an entire nation, and is also true for individuals who own their own little piece of private property also. Think about it. Historically, how did people become slaves? You would become a slave when you couldn't pay your debts. You would become a slave when you couldn't feed yourself, or you were homeless. As a last resort, you would sell yourself and become someone else's slave. But if you had land, you wouldn't need to do this. You would always have a solution for food. You could grow food on your plot of land. You would always have a solution for shelter. You could sleep on your land. And if push came to shove and debt threatened your independence, you could sell your land and avoid slavery that way. You see the importance of land. So we might say that the Yovel laws are engineered, so to speak, such that they combat slavery. I'll repeat that. The Yovel laws that we are looking at Shavuot through its lens are engineered by the Most High, so to speak, such that they combat slavery. They combat slavery in two ways. The first is a direct way, by freeing slaves and returning them to their families. But the second way is preventative. Yovel acts to forestall slavery by returning people to their ancestral land that they once sold. In other words, if you sold your land because you came on hard times and you find yourself a stranger in someone else's land, you are a step closer to slavery. You are vulnerable to enslavement. But then Yovel comes along and returns you to your ancestral land. So now you are safe. This is the importance of Yovel. This is why it's important to look at Shavuot through the eyes of Yovel, because they speak the same language. Yovel returns people to where they belong. Returning to your land and returning to your family. In other words, returning to your source. This is what happened at Sinai. At the revelation at Sinai, the creator of all showed up in the world. Or to be more precise, he didn't show up at all because he couldn't be seen. Instead, the moment of revelation happened through sound. It happened through the heavenly shofar blast that became louder and louder. A divine sound that eventually resolved itself into words, words which we apprehend as the 10 Commandments. Let me repeat that because it's critical. The moment of revelation happened through sound. It happened through a heavenly shofar blast that became louder and louder. A divine sound that eventually resolved itself into words, words which we apprehend as the 10 Commandments. I'll pause here and say, there is a book written by Zion Lex called The DNA of Sound. Try and get a copy and read it. Very powerful book. Let's go on. Sound is critical. We have divine sound that eventually resolved into words, words which we apprehend as the 10 Commandments. Yovel descended upon a mountain with all of Israel gathered around it, but we couldn't see anything. It was dark, the text tells us, and a thick fog hovered over the mountain. But we heard, oh, did we hear, And it was there that we heard Yovel proclaim a great truth that would once again be heard in the laws of Yovel. Kili haaretz, the earth is mine. This experience at Sinai was a homecoming event in spades. I repeat that. This experience at Sinai, when we stood at Sinai, it was a homecoming event. Shavuot is a homecoming event. In Yovel, as we know it, the event that takes place every 50 years, individuals who were slaves come home to their families, and individuals come home to their land. In this way, people return to their earthly creators. But now, at Sinai, all that would happen on a collective level. An entire nation of families who were enslaved, they will be gathered into their heavenly creator. This is why Yah said, "You have seen what I have done to Egypt, and how I have lifted you on eagle's wings and brought you here to me." An entire nation of families who were enslaved, they would be gathered into their heavenly creator at Shavuot. So in Yovel, people who are enslaved go back to their source, their parents, their families. And at Sinai, a nation of families who were enslaved goes back to its source. The nation is gathered into the creator of all and finally becomes secure. This is why we say the escape of the coming out of Egypt did not make us free till we experienced the revelation at Sinai. It was a homecoming event to source, to Yovel. To family, to creator. And finally, we became secure. Until then, the children of Israel had been traveling through a desert. They had experienced no man's land. And in no man's land, they attained a provisional kind of freedom. There was no more Egyptian taskmasters standing there with a lash, forcing them to submit to backbreaking labor. But on the other hand, there was no security. They were travelers. They were nomads. Where would water and food come from? Where would they take shelter? Suddenly, at Sinai, they experienced a creator who actually descended into their world and claimed them as his own. They were standing on his land now, what we call God land. They had come home to their ultimate family, their heavenly creator. And so it was for the rest of their sojourn in the desert. They will always have food and shelter because their parent in heaven, Yovel, would directly provide it to them. They would wander, yes, but strangely, they would always have food. It is fascinating to know the language the Torah later uses to characterize this food that they got, the manna that Israel would eat in the desert as they traveled to Canaan. You see that towards the very end of the Torah. The Torah speaks of Yovel as if he were a powerful eagle, a mother bird, caring for his young. It tells us, Deuteronomy 32, he caused his young to ride over the high places of the earth, and they would eat the produce of my fields. Which fields are these? These are not earthly fields. They're eating heavenly bounty. They wouldn't have access to the bounty of the earth. The earth was just a parched desert, and it was like they were flying over it. They weren't connected to terrestrial ground. that could nurture them. They were fed from the bounty of heaven's field. They ate manna, bread, and it's called food of angels. That came to them from the sky until they would come to the land of Canaan. And with that blast of the shofar, the era of life in the desert came to an end. At the cusp of entering the land of Canaan, at Jericho, we would finally leave no man's land and come into possession of land of our own. As the walls of the city came tumbling down, we had the experience of being reunited with land, and that was particularly our own ancestral land, to which we as a nation were deeply connected from generations past, from the time of our own ancestors, from the time of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The event that would give it to us would be a Yovel type event. After 7 times 7 circuits around the city, the land will be demarcated as Sinai had been. Back in the desert, and once again, we will hear the blast of the Yovel shofar as we had heard it at Sinai. It's the same event. One took place at Sinai where we became free. And then we see the same language used at Jericho, because that was the second part of the Yovel event, where land goes back to their owner and then slaves are made free. With that blast of the shofar, the era of life in the desert came to an end. Seemingly, we had left the intimate cocoon of Yahweh's direct embrace. We were no longer fed from the manna of heaven's fields. We would have our own very land, terrestrial land, land that you could touch and feel and farm on it and would provide for you, land that you could build upon, that you could make permanent homes on for yourselves. But there is one thing that we never forgot. Yah tells us, Kili haaretz, the land at the end of the day is mine. It belongs to me. It belongs to Yahweh. We should not forget. The land at the end of the day is Yahweh's. It belongs to Yahweh. It is not really something that can be owned by people. Yes, people relate to the land deeply. Land provides for us, gives us shelter, gives us food, but we don't really own the land. It is too sacred and special to be owned. So he tells us in Leviticus 25, the land shall not be sold permanently, for the land belongs to me. For you are strangers and temporary residents with me. We want our land back, we say. We are going back to the land. It is not our land. It belongs to Yahweh. The land shall not be sold permanently, for the land belongs to me. So when you mess up, he can kick you out. For the land belongs to me, for you are strangers and temporary residents with me. Shavuot is the holiday on which we learn how to relate to our land, meaning that it belongs to Yah. It is the holiday that we gratefully experience our national homecoming to our parent in heaven, the master of the universe, Yahweh. And our understanding that if we come home to Yahweh, our land, it comes home to Yahweh too. I repeat that. If we come home to Yahweh, our land, it comes home to Yahweh too. Notice I didn't say that our land comes back to us. No, it doesn't belong to us. It belongs to Yahweh. What would trigger us coming back to the land is coming back to Yahweh. Just as We did not get into Jericho first before we had the Sinai experience. We had the Sinai experience first. We came to Yovel first. And then he gave us access, not ownership. He gave us access to his land, the land of Canaan. He just gave us access to a portion of it. The whole earth belongs to him, Kili Haaretz. But he gave us access to this land that he deemed special to him. So our understanding should be on Shavuot that if we come home to Yovel, our land, it comes home to Yovel. And you shall perform the Feast of Weeks to Yovel, your Elohim, the donation you can afford to give. With everything that I have said, we would ask, but what does it look like to us? How do we do this in this 21st century? Leviticus 25 tells us, and you shall perform the festival of weeks to Yovel, your Elohim, the donation you can afford to give. How do you give? According to how Yovel, your Elohim, shall bless you. I wish I could focus on that. It didn't say will bless you. It says shall bless you or has blessed you, shall bless you. I'll leave that alone for our 9 a.m. class. And you shall rejoice before Yovel, your Elohim, you and your son and your daughter. Look at the definition of family here. It says you and your sons and your daughters. Curiously, it has been expanded because look who else you are celebrating with. Pay close attention to that. Look who else you're celebrating with. Look who else.
Hello?
Look who else you're celebrating with. Sorry, I muted myself accidentally. You and your sons and your daughter. You would think it's just you. But Shavuot is homecoming. You will think it's just your immediate family. But we've just seen that Shavuot is homecoming. A day when people are gathered into their families. So you must celebrate with your families. But the text does not stop there. Look who else you are celebrating with. And your manservant, and your maidservant, and the Levite, who is within your cities, and the stranger, and the orphan, and the widow, who are among you, in the place which Yovel, your Elohim, will choose to establish his name therein. Who is the stranger? Who is the orphan, the widow? Who are amongst you? These are all people who maybe don't have any land. They are the dispossessed. And they are your family too. The poor, the widow, the orphan, your servant. These are all your family too. On this day, on Sinai Day, the master of the universe made a nation of slaves free and proclaimed us all members of his family, all eligible for sustenance from the fields of heaven. So on this day, emulate that. and let them all partake in the bounty of the land that Yovel has given us. In so doing, remember, as the verse concludes, you shall remember that you were slaves in Egypt. As you do this with a remembrance that at one time you were also slaves in Egypt, having no land, dispossessed. You were a stranger. Ki eved hayita be'eretz Mizraim, that you were slaves in the land of Egypt, and you shall keep and perform these statutes. So he's saying on Shavuot, you're not just celebrating with your immediate family, with your extended family. Invite the stranger in the land that you live in also. Let them come and enjoy with you, because you were also, your ancestors were also, in time past, also strangers, also in that same predicament. On Shavuot, we are to bring Bikurim to Yovel, and we feast and share the land's bounty with those less fortunate, and realize that they are family too. We bring Bikurim, which is first fruits. For many of us in the 21st century, it is hard to relate to Shavuot the way the text of the Torah or the Bible portrays it. Most of us are not farmers. We don't bring first fruits. We don't really have bounty from our personal land that we could share with the Levites, the poor, the widow, the orphan, the stranger. We don't have slaves. What am I supposed to do? How is Shavuot supposed to look for me? Well, I might not have crops, and so I don't give first fruits to Yah. But I do create things, whether I'm a CEO, a musician, an artist, an author, or a partner in a law firm, an engineer, a tech, a driver, a chef. Maybe those are my fruits. Maybe there's a way I can take some of my talent, what I do best in life, and say to myself, most of these fruits I used to take care of myself, my family. But how can I dedicate some of them back to Yovel? What might he wish me to use them for? Maybe we can give first fruits from those. We don't have the Levites, but we still have the widows. We still have the orphans. We still have the poor. They should still benefit from the Bikurim. The anniversary of revelation at Sinai is the day to learn Torah, yes. To prize Torah, yes. But it is also a day to recognize that the master of the universe is present in the world. We come to understand that we are all members of the family of the Most High, even those whose fortune is low, or at least lower than ours. With our gifts above and below, given in joy, we recognize that all that we have is really the bounty of the fields of heaven, because the entire earth is his. What we received at Sinai, the Torah, is inconceivable without how we received it. I'll say that again. We usually focus on what we received, but today we focused on how we received it. What we received at Sinai, which is the Torah, is inconceivable without how we received it, without the homecoming experience of revelation. The original Shavuot at Sinai was the day on which we came home to our Father in heaven. And it was a day on which we experienced land coming home to him as well. On the day we experienced these truths about the sanctity of people and of land, we experienced this truth about the sanctity of people and of land, about the fact that we cannot really own either. On that day, we received the Torah. It is a Torah built on these truths, a Torah that tries to help us live those truths out every day of our life. Indeed, without these two truths, living out the commandment of the Torah is almost a farce. Without these two truths, living out the commandments, the mitzvot, the instructions of the Torah is almost a farce. The Torah is built on the realization of the sanctity of land and people. At its deepest level, Yovel, people and land. They are all part of my family. I'll repeat that. The land is part of my family. The people of Israel, they're part of my family. And then the deity, Yovel, is part of my family. Once these truths are accepted, Yovel, his people, and his land, the Torah, which gives me rules by which to relate to the land, to people, and to Yovel, will start to make sense. We might be in exile today. We might not be on our land today. But we know that on Shavuot, our ancestors came home to their deity. They were set free at the revelation at Sinai. And then, at another Yovel event at Jericho, the walls that the Canaanites thought gave them legal ownership came tumbling down. We still hope in exile. Since time, history repeats itself. Today we might be in exile, but tomorrow the walls will fall down again, and we shall get what really belongs to Yovel, our land back, which he chose to give us access to it. And hopefully, we will not go away from his Torah. This is what Shavuot meant to our ancestors. When they stood at Sinai, they became Yovel's property. They were finally set free. They were not escaped slaves. They were not slaves that Pharaoh let them go. They were not slaves that Benjamin Franklin gave them freedom. No. We say that Yah took us out of Egypt. No one set us free. Yah took us out. And then he made us his own at Sinai. He gave us his Torah. And then he gave us a land that belonged to our ancestors. All through the Yovel lens. So when we celebrate our Shavuot, whenever you choose to celebrate it, remember what we are celebrating is the return, the homecoming to Yovel and to our land. Shabbat Shalom. Questions, contributions, additions before we close.
Hi, Rabbi. I have a question for you from YouTube. It is not Shavuot related, but hopefully you can answer. Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly.
Awesome. So you use Yovel and Yah interchangeably, and somebody wants to know which is correct. What is it? Yah, Yovel, or what is the other one? Sorry. Yahuwah, sorry. Yeah.
Yahuwah. Okay, so all of them are correct. So they are different appellations or how people pronounce the name of the ancient one, depending on where you're getting your vowels from. The Eves in West Africa or on the African continent know the deity by Yeve based on our vowels, where we get the vowels from. Like the text says, the people who are called by my name. So we are called the Eves, meaning the Hebrews, and the name of the deity is Yeve. So you can see that correlation. You have the name of the people in the name of the deity. So yes, Yeve, Yah, Yehovah, Yahuwah, all these names depending on, I would say, the dialect of the Hebrew tongue that you're speaking. I use Yeve mostly because that's what comes easily to my tongue based on where I'm coming from. But I know my brothers in the West use Yah a lot. So I try to use that also just to, make the conversation go so they can relate to it, because most people haven't heard Yeve. So hope I answered that question. Mr. Andre, please go ahead.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom,
to you
sir.
and to everyone. Going back to Joshua 6, to Jericho.
Yes.
What part, because Jericho is representing the moon, what part does the moon play in this regarding, because thinking Hebraically, the moon does its paths, its circuits around the sun. Also thinking Hebraically, or just thinking about the religion of Islam with their symbols being the moon. Now I know this is before Islam as far as Jericho, but getting back to the moon, what part, is there any part or meaning of the fact that Jericho means moon play in this?
I really don't know. I can speak on our understanding of the moon from a West African Hebraic perspective, but what it might have meant to them, I really don't know. But so when we look at the moon, which is really, I think what you've pointed out is really fascinating, because our idea is that the moon waxes and wanes, and you have every 15 days, it's either have a full moon or you have a half moon. When you look at from Abraham to Solomon or to David, you have 15 generations. And that was a full moon. And then from Solomon to our day now, where we say we're living in a half moon, we know that we're going to get that full moon where everything is whole, everything is complete. But at this point, we are in exile. So what we do regarding the moon is, during the 8-day circumcision of my tribe, the Gadites or the Gadangbes, when we wake up early in the morning to perform the custom, we come out and then we take the baby early in the morning, and then we show the baby to the moon, not worshiping the moon, but as a symbol of Israel, that no matter what happens, there are times that we'll have a full moon, there's times that we'll have a half moon, there's times that it's going to be 3/4. But what we know is that come what may, we're always going to have a full moon. Symbolic of this child, even though it's going to have challenges, even after 15 generations of our history from Abraham, even though this child is going to have challenges, we know, just like the moon, it changes. And one day we're going to have that full moon, which represents Israel.
Thank you.
So that's how we look at it from the West African culture my tribe. That's how we look at the moon. We don't worship it. We call it Chochobi. Chocho means the moon, meaning that life would happen. You see, if you're the sun, you have a problem. You're constant. No, but things change. So we go with the moon. Things change. And when things change, when there's a half moon, we don't throw in the towel and say we've given up. No. We know that we, by all means, one day have a full moon. And that is what Israel represents.
Thank you. I have another question, but I'm going to hold off and allow someone else to.
Okay, no problem. If you don't get to ask the 9 o'clock, we continue from there.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? See, there's in the chat here. Okay. Is there a correlation between the sevens of Revelation and Yovel? It could be, but I have not made that correlation yet. So it could be. I have not made that correlation yet. So it says, you should keep the feast at the place where Yahweh chooses to make his name abide. You have Israelite groups that state they cannot celebrate the feast days because they are not in Jerusalem, because that's where Yahweh placed his name at the temple and is no longer exist. How would you address that situation? Yes. So if you are one who says because we're not in the land, you cannot keep the feast, well, you can choose not to. But if you understand the feast days are the moeds. Moeds don't translate as feast. That is a poor translation. Moed translates as appointment. These are divine appointments. These are when heaven has an appointment with earth. So it's like a meeting place, a place of meeting, where Moshe would go and he would hear Yah speak to him through the space between the two golden angels. It's called the Oel Moed. That is where the name comes from. Oel Moed means the place of meeting or the tent of meeting. So we're meeting with Yah. You cannot say that because we're not in the land, Yah does not meet with us. The problem is you interpreting the word Moed as feast, as a party or a festival. No, it means appointment. Yah still meets with us. His appointments are based on seed time and harvest. During nature, we're not in the land, but we still have spring, where we determine Passover. So yes, you can go and say, because we're not in the land, I'm not going to celebrate. What you're missing is you're missing Yah's appointment. He's meeting with individuals. He's meeting with Israel as a whole. And when you miss these appointments, you are at a disadvantage. It's like we are getting ready to meet our deity. And on these days, what we call portals open. And if you want more of this, we had a webinar on this. Portals open. And when portals open, it is not based on your faith, it's not based on your merit, it's just based on the hand of Yah. So if you don't understand this, if your understanding of the feast is just a party, sure. But if you understand it as a place of meeting, where you had to meet Yah, you prepare for it, whether you're in the land or you're not in the land. What we forget is the Torah was not given in Canaan. The Torah was given in the wilderness. It was for a reason. It binds everywhere. So you might not have certain things in place. Doesn't mean that we don't do it. Even if you don't want to do it as a rehearsal. If you don't do it and rehearse and see how it's done, how can you do it when you go back to the land? You would have lost it. So some of these things, even when we do it without being in the land, we're keeping the tradition going so that our sons and our daughters will see it, so that when they get to the land, they can know how to keep it. That is why when you study the Torah, you don't skip the dimensions of the tabernacle. We read all that. We want to know the dimensions of the temple. all these instructions that Moshe gave. We don't say that we're not in the land, the temple is no longer there, so we don't study it. No. We study it to know it. So should in case would have to erect these things again, we know how it is done. There's a reason why it was given to us, even though Yah knew that we're going to lose the land. So it depends on the individual. You don't want to keep it because you're not in the land. That is up to you. But understanding that Moed means appointed feasts. You have an appointment with Yahweh. He meets with his creation, and we get ready to meet with him. That is why we keep the feast, even in exile.
Hello, brother Basil. Cynthia here again.
Good morning,
How are you?
Cynthia. I'm well. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I just wanted to ask you, just for clarity, to celebrate the Shavuot is really to do with, is it just giving charity, like giving charity basically? Is that all there is to it? I understand what you've explained and everything, but I want to just have clarity because I need to know, is it just giving charity? Do you do studies in the Torah? I've heard people eat cheesecake and stuff as well, so I want to.
Yes. Okay, let me answer that. The reason why they eat cheesecake is because the moment they stood at Sinai and then they received the Torah, all the laws were binding. So you couldn't go back and eat certain things that you were going to eat. So they're eating cheese or cheesecake. They're eating dairy products because they had this mindset that you couldn't go back and use the same cooking utensils that you cooked meat with and then cook milk products. So this is where the idea of eating cheesecake comes from, or cheese or dairy products. It's not a Hebraic idea. It's more Jewish. When I say Jewish, I mean Ashkenazi Jewish custom. It's not Hebraic. It's not from a Hebraic perspective. But when it's a good question that you ask. No, you're not doing charity. What you're doing, you're not giving them handouts. You're celebrating with them. So you can have a feast at home and then invite these people. Or you can have a feast maybe somewhere else, maybe in a restaurant, something. You invite and you're sharing with what Yahweh has blessed you with. So it's a form of charity, but you're not giving charity because the person needs it. No, this is a celebration that you are celebrating. It's like you're having a party and then you're inviting people to come and rejoice with you, to come and celebrate with you based on how Yahweh, like the text says, shall bless you. So yes,
that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. We're celebrating with the widow, the orphan, the stranger, etc. Yes, please go ahead.
My question for you. Most people want to know, when does this feast day or Moed start for Shavuot?
Okay, so it depends on the calendar that you keep. I've noticed in the West, you have so many calendars. Everybody seems to justify the calendar that they keep. We don't have that issue in West Africa because we act as a community. So we have the elders, the Wulama, what we call Wulama. The Wulama would translate as the high priest. So they determine, based on how they read the calendar, they would determine when Passover starts. And then 50 days from that time, we have Shavuot. So based on the calendar that we keep back home, Shavuot will start today because of when Passover started. So based on the calendar that we Gadang-based keep, Shavuot will start today.
Okay, so with that said, since the Moed is an actual, I guess, spiritual opening of portals, or a time in which we align with heaven directly, if I'm not
Correct.
mistaken from your past teachings.
Yes.
It doesn't really matter. It does matter what calendar we keep, because if you're keeping the wrong calendar and you're observing Shavuot based on the wrong calendar, then that portal really isn't open.
That is.
So I know you're
Yes.
trying to be.
Oh, that's very good.
I know you're trying to be politically correct, but what is when does it start?
Okay.
So that
Yes.
our brothers and sisters in the West can actually follow the right and be in line with the right opening of the portals and the right visitation with Yovel.
Okay, that's a very good question. And what my sister said is very critical. If these moeds on a spiritual level are portals that are opening, it is when heaven has an appointment with earth. If you miss it, you have to wait a whole year to get to it. Okay, so really discerning and finding out when these portals really open is critical. It's not rocket science. I've seen all the calculations that is done in the West. Yah tells us that his calendar operates on seed time and harvest. So what we do, what our elders do, what our Wulam or the high priest do is they go by nature. Nature speaks a lot to us. What we've done is we've named the months, our months. We have a 13-month calendar, and we've named the months based on what happens in nature. So we have Arabata, Ofra, Ochokiki, Abebe. Abebe will start Passover, because that's when you see the butterflies come out. You see on the feast of Pesach is the feast of spring, is when things that are buried come out. So all we need to do, without going too much into details, is to observe these things that nature itself shows us. When we see these insects, when we see these flowers, when we look at the stars, when we look at, we're not reading the stars, but some of the months are named after the stars, so that we know what is happening there. When we look at the rain, when we look at the sun, how hot it is shining, we get to know these moeds because Yah's timetable is embedded in nature. So that's why I said I keep the Gadangbe calendar, because it's from way back. We've been doing this way back and keeping this sort of calendar. Even through when we were migrating to West Africa, we were keeping these calendar system. It got changed when we encountered the Europeans, but we have still kept both calendars. So that was a good thing. When it comes to our feast, we go by our original calendar, not the Gregorian one. So based on the information from our elders, based on what we see in nature, Shavuot, I can send you the feasts. I can send you the dates, but if you count 50 days backwards from today, that was when Passover was, and we observed it at that time. And then 50 days after Pesach is Shavuot. So what I can do is, I was going to do a video on the Gadangbe calendar that is kept by the Gadites. It's almost the same as the ones that the Eves actually keep, if I'm not mistaken. So I can make that available to show you the names of the months and the story that they tell, and how we determine the feast based on the names of the months, and then the references from the Torah, and we can go from there. So I can send you that information in an email, or post a video explaining when the feast starts and what determines the starts of the feast and how it actually matches with the weather. Example, in Sukkot, we are told that I would give you the former and latter rain in the first month. Before I say that, let me say this briefly, shortly. There are two calendar systems. Israel keeps a calendar system that starts in on the feast of Pesach. In the text, it says, this will be the first of the month to you, meaning to Israel. The first of the month, according to the text, is April, or not April, Passover, wherever that starts. Okay, that is for Israel. But that does not change Yah's timetable of feast time, seed time, and harvest. He deals with a different timetable. The year always starts with seed time, not harvest. You don't start the year with harvest. It starts with seed time. Seed has to go into the soil before you have a harvest. So seed goes down when we're going to enter winter. You put seeds in the soil, the land goes to rest. And then in the springtime, you get a harvest. Anything that is in the ground has to come out. That is why the Gadang base of West Africa, our year starts in September, because that is when the earth is going to sleep. We call it Bo. Bo means that it's signifying the raindrops in that month. The raindrops are so huge. We call it Bo, meaning that we pray for rain. It says, I give you the former and the latter rain in the first month, which to us is Bo. We pray for rain during that time because we know the earth is going to go to sleep till Passover. That is almost 5 months. So we plant our seeds in the soil and then we pray for rain. Rain means that we're going to have a bountiful harvest. We call it mato, meaning that we are taking the harvest and then putting it in storage so that we can feed on it till the next harvest on Passover or Pesach. So we've named the months to match Yah's feast days or Yah's calendar, Yah's timetable. And we've done that since time immemorial. So I can share that calendar with you. We don't have to calculate anything. You don't have people running around saying it starts this. Nobody bothers with that. Why? Because we have a system that the elders determine that. Because we are acting as the tribe, as the clan, as the family. We have this system. So nobody bothers about that. Like this year, we got a text message or a WhatsApp message, and they're giving us all that information, and it just goes around like wildfire. Yeah. So it's an interesting principle that I can expound more on a video and put it on YouTube.
Here in we're in the West, and as you see, regarding our people here in the U.S.,
correct,
and those also that's in the islands,
yes,
Caribbean, Bahamas, those areas, that we have a desire to go back home. When I say go back home, we're actually talking about Israel,
correct,
in West Africa, and also in various parts of Africa, because we're scattered all over the place.
Yes.
There, are they feeling the same way, or are they looking to reunite with us? And then we all go back.
Yes. I think so. I think there are some things that needs to be ironed out for us to actually work together. I haven't heard anyone that is saying that our kingsmen should not come home or even visit the land. So yes, I think now more than ever, that yearning for unity or working together, it's really making noise on the continent and here also. I know there's some people who say they're not African and they don't want to have anything to do with Africa. I think sometimes it's being said out of emotions and not really knowing what really happened. But sometimes it's just people are offended, and maybe they do have the right to be offended. But I think there is a yearning for the two continents, or the 4 continents, wherever we are spread, to unite, because that's the only way that we're going to come out of this predicament. And
Brother Akwetey, I have a question.
yes, so 2 more questions, and then we cut off to our next private session. Yes,
So-
please
so-
go ahead, sir.
So the question is, just as when Yeshua came and he was chastising Israel and its leaders about not knowing the Torah, not following the Torah, that suggests that each one of us has an individual responsibility to know it and to keep it and to follow its tenets.
Correct.
And as it relates to the calendar, how are we any less responsible for understanding how it works and being able to determine if there's error in those who are leading us if we don't know? And I suspect as it relates to these portals that should open, Yah knew that we wouldn't know. He
Correct.
understands that we wouldn't know. So to assume that they would not be open for us when we in our hearts desire to meet with him seems incongruous.
Correct. Well, you're right. Because you see, it states explicitly, he said, Moshe, remember, you are coming out of Egypt in the month of spring. They couldn't come out in the summertime. They couldn't come out on Sukkot. Why spring? Spring is when nature gives everything up. Everything that is buried under the ground comes out in spring. So the energy was right. When the energy is right, things happen easily, naturally. So he said, remember, you should celebrate it in the springtime. Why? Because the spring is when things come out, just as you're coming out in Egypt. So this was a portal. You see, on Passover, on Pesach, we're just not having a feast. Those who understand that portals are open, meaning that this is the time to draw from the energy that is available to be free, maybe of debt, anything that has you oppressed, not necessarily somebody whipping you, but anything that has you oppressed. Passover has the energy to give you release from that. So when you don't know this, when you don't celebrate it as such, it becomes a ritual, and that is where we fall short. We are very quick to keep the ritual without understanding what is happening spiritually. So he says, don't forget this happened in the spring. The spring is when everything comes out. If you look at the end of the year, during Yom Kippur, during what do you call it? What's the other feast? Rosh Hashanah. Look at world history, especially in the West. Look at what happens during those days when the earth is being judged. You haven't paid attention before. Look at it, and you see that it's being judged. These things don't happen in the spring. But during the energy when judgment is being passed, you see judgment going forth on the earth. It is discerning the set time. That's why Yeshua would say, if you know the moment of your visitation. See, these are deep esoteric things that are not taught because we're so focused on the rituals, but not the messages behind it. In a short while, sometime this month, we're going to look at the mezuzah, what we're supposed to put on the wall, what it means, the zitzit, the fringes that we wear, what does it mean? All these things that we are told to do, the kosher, what does it mean? How does it affect us spiritually? Because at the end of the day, that is the focus, not the letter of the law, but the meaning behind it. David said it best. He said, Yah said David was a man after his own heart, meaning that he knew the reasons why he was just not performing the rituals. So he could say, your Torah is sweet. He would say, the Torah is not a burden. The Torah is like honey. Why? He understood these things. His precepts. Pre means before, sept means thought. So when it says his precepts, meaning that he understood what Yah taught of before he gave the instructions. Precept. before the thought. Somebody can know how to drive a car, but it's those who know how it works that are able to fix it, that are able to keep it longer, that are able to save money without, paying someone else to do these things for them. So it is knowing the how. See, so Yeshua would say, I came to reveal his name to you. Why? You forgot his name. He came to reveal certain things that we lost, and we want to go to the deeper meaning of it. And when you find out, you see that the Torah is beautiful. It expands itself.
Akwetey.
Yes, madam.
This is Yavina.
Madam Yavina, greetings.
Torah, thank you for everything that you are helping us with. I do have a comment and a question.
Please go ahead.
Okay. I remember we spoke on this maybe 3 months ago.
Correct.
About how we make determinations on several things.
Correct.
For those of us that are here in the West that were brought here in captivity, we've lost just about everything. We have no real timing that we can judge the portals. I understand what you're saying about observing the seasons. We have been working on that here for a few years and looking at what lies in the heavens. But when you really look at it, the seasons do not all happen at the same time over the planet.
Correct.
So because we're displaced from Yasharal and we're here in the United States, we are attempting to base the calendar on what we observe here, which still makes us off. Your suggestion to us a few months ago is to ask the priest. We have no priest here. You said, look at the chickens. When the chickens go to bed, most of us don't own chickens. Many people probably haven't even seen a live chicken.
Correct.
So how do we work that out? Most of us don't have ties to the continent. I happen to have a friend, Imaola, who is from Lagos.
Yes.
However, she does not know how the calendar works. So having put all those things together, seeing that we have no foundation here to determine those things. We have no one that can really help us to determine that. And then when we are talking to the few people that we know on the continent, they're telling us just to ask someone or to look up at the heavens. How do we do that, seeing that we have been so indoctrinated into the system? We don't use the Gregorian calendar to determine our feast, but we do attempt to locate when the beginning of the year is, when those feast days are. It still seems that we're off. How do we get this correct, and to whom should we go in this country, or who can come from the continent to help us here to determine when we should be celebrating these feast days and how to read it for ourselves? I don't know about anyone else on the line, but I was very well indoctrinated into this Christianity, into this system here. So when I came out of church, I don't want someone just to tell me a thing. I want you to show me how that works and back that up with scripture, back that up with history, so that I'll know how to do those things for myself. So how do we get to that point?
Yes. So I think, so let me comment on, I have 9:01. Okay. 5 more minutes, and then we cut over to our other class. So let me comment on what my sister has said. She had mentioned, I was talking to her some time back, and I think the question that came up is, when does the day begin? Like the sundown, when is it? And I told her that it's easy for us to know because there is an internal clock that Yah put in the chickens or these animals. And you see, back home in West Africa, you have these livestock. People have these livestock. So let's say when in my home in Ghana, we had a hen coop, because my twin brother would sell chickens. It's like clockwork. At 6 o'clock, they go to sleep. No matter if it's raining, if the sun is up, it doesn't matter what is happening. Their eternal clock or internal clock puts them to sleep at 6 o'clock. So we usually will laugh at people. Somebody who goes to bed early, we ask, are you a chicken? Okay. So how do I know that that time is there? I don't even have to go outside. When I see or I see the chickens walking into their hen coop and they're all going to fall asleep, I know that in nature, things are going to go to sleep. So with that, you don't even need a priest. You don't need a prophet to tell you when sundown is. We say sundown when the sun goes down, but we are not looking at the sun. Point of correction, because when it's cloudy, you don't see the sun. Doesn't mean that you're out of luck. No, there are other things that Yah has put into these things, these animals. There are some flowers. I don't know what they call them. At 6 o'clock, sundown, they close up. They would close like they would fold. When the sun is coming up, they would open and then they would get sunshine. When it's getting to the end, they close up. So these things, animals, birds, all these things, Yah has put his secrets in them, his time in them. And we can observe these things and observe and go with nature. Okay, now to your question, we're in the West. We are all keeping this timetable or this calendar. How do we get back? I think it's studying. What I'll say, okay, let's say this. The closest any Hebrew can get to steady customs and culture that you see in the Torah, the closest you can get is not the land of Israel, because those there don't know about the customs and cultures in the text. You want to go to the coast of West Africa specifically. There are Hebrews spread across the continent, but the coast of West Africa is very critical because that is where majority of the Hebrews moved to, and they moved there with their pre-exilic customs. It is very important to study those customs. That is why people like Divine Prospect is very important, because he spent time to study these things. What I didn't say about the calendar is that we call something, we say the wulomo amekote, meaning that they pick the stones, meaning that they cast lots. The lots that you read in the text is still performed today in West Africa. So if we are not able to see the flowers, we are not able to see the butterflies, those things that we see that determines the beginning of that month of Passover, we can still cast the lots to determine it. Okay. So to come out of all the confusion, it is very key to study these tribes, these Hebrew tribes that are still on the continent of West Africa, study their customs, study these things that they brought over from the land of Israel that they still keep. And from studying that, now you have to determine, okay, this tribe keeps this calendar. This tribe keeps this calendar. How long have they been keeping it? Does it match with what we have in the text? And when you do that, you would see that the Gadangbes, what they keep is pretty accurate because they've been keeping that since the migration. So to answer that briefly, it's having that connection, maybe to somebody like, I won't say myself because there are people who know this better than me. I'm still a student under their feet. But having a connection, studying West African culture, and understanding the calendar system, and then finding somebody to explain you, to say, okay, when we say this, this is how it matches in the Torah. This is why Bon is our first month, which is the feast of Sukkot, when we bring our harvest and say thank you to Yah for giving us a good year, and then we pack some into the storage, and then we wait for the earth to go to sleep, and then we wait till Passover to get another harvest. So it's studying West African culture to be specific, and then having somebody to explain to you or say, okay, this is why we do this. This is the calendar. This is the months. This is what it means. This is how it correlates with what we have in the text. And then I think when we do that, we start to get clarity. And I think there's a lot of work to be done from the West and then from the people in the continent to actually start working together to celebrating these feasts. If you can make it, I can give you a list of feasts that the Hebrews in West Africa celebrate, when they celebrate it, why they celebrate it, and then learn. It's something to learn it from a book, and it's something to be there. That's why I take my hats off for my sister, Only Love Austin, who is still in Ghana today. And she does a lot of groundwork. She's one key person that you can talk to also, because she's been to almost all these feasts or these events or these moeds in the continent, and she can give more light on it also. She is awesome. Only Love Austin. If you don't follow her on Facebook, please follow her on Instagram. She has a YouTube channel. Okay. So sometimes it takes going to the place and then looking at it for yourself and see how Torah comes alive. Just by what they do, you yourself sometimes will be able to open the Torah and say, this is what they're doing. And then you can ask questions. You can ask, okay, why do you do this? Why do you do that? Why do you do this? The commoner might not be able to explain, but these chiefs, these elders, they would really answer your question. They would love to share this kind of information. Okay. So I think that is how we can study in West African culture if we can take a trip. And I tell everybody, most people want to go to Israel. Yes, it's good. But please try and go to the continent of West Africa, because the pre-exilic customs that you read in the Torah is not in the land of Israel, it's in West Africa. And when you do that, you start understanding from names that we have, from events, from festivals, from how we do things. And like I said, Madam Only Love Austin will be a very good resource for that also. Awesome. I want to thank everybody who showed up on YouTube Live. Thank you for taking time to study on this Shavuot day. For those who keep Shavuot today, like we said, it's a homecoming for all of us. And we're supposed to share. We're supposed to have a feast and invite everybody, because Yah has blessed us. He's delivered us from slavery. He is going to give us our land back when we get to Jericho. This happened to our ancestors, but we always pray that one day it's going to happen to, if not ourselves, it's going to happen to our children. Shavuot is homecoming. It's freeing us from slavery ultimately, and it's giving us our land back. Okay. Those who don't study with us, you can go on my website, kingdomofkings.org. We have Shabbat classes that we're going to move into right now. Look around, and if Yah puts it on your heart, I will tell you up front, it's not for everybody. If you want to study the Torah from its Hebraic context, dealing with the text only, yes, it's for you. If your goals are something else, it might not be for you, but check it out. There's another one, Taste of Text. Taste of Text is when you study on the go. We have like 5 minutes nuggets, verse by verse, chapter by chapter, from certain topics or chapters of the book that we have taken, and then we expound on them. All of this can be found on the website. So join us if Yah puts it on your heart. If not, there's always a time for everything. So I want to thank you for joining us live on YouTube. Yah bless you all. We're going to cut over to our weekly Shabbat classes. Thank you so much. May Yah bless you. May he keep you. May Yah shine his face upon you. May Yah give you peace. Shalom. Blessings to all.